Good afternoon. Thank you for joining Argent Talk number 10, Development of Wider Audience with the Use of Digital Media, Tate's Challenge today. I am Mami Kataoka. I'm Chief Curator of the Mori Art Museum, and I'll be facilitating this session. And this series, Argent Talk, is Mori Art Museum's platform to discuss Argent topics with artists, curators, critics, and those who of the art world are making changes. And we started this series in June 2010, and this today marks its 10th edition. We hold the program on a irregular basis because we need to grab people who are passing by Tokyo. And so we make announcements usually via online media, such as museum's website, Twitter, Facebook, and email news. And today, Argent Talk is co-organized by the British Council and features the Mark Sands, Director of Audience and Media at the Tate, who manages the Tate online branding, public programs, public relations, marketing, membership, ticket seats, and so on. We also welcome Alex Fleetwood, founder and director of the British creative group called Hide and Seek, that specializes in creating social games and playful experiences. In doing so, the talk will consist of an introduction to the various innovative projects Tate has undertaken, followed by the discussion about the further possibilities of developing a wider audience for Japanese art institutions like ourselves. First of all, we would like to welcome Jeff Streeter, who is the director of British Council in Japan, that co-organizes this program today. And following his opening remarks, the two guests would make presentations. So let's welcome Jeff Streeter.
Thank you, Mami. And I'd like to begin by saying that on behalf of the British Council, we're absolutely delighted to be working here with the museum today on this exciting talk as part of a series of talks, as Mami has explained. These days in the UK, we all hear a lot about shortage of money, which is a reality, particularly in the public sector, but also in the private sector, given the state of our economy and the difficulties in Europe, problems which are felt around the world. And one of the challenges that face those of us working within the arts, that includes the British Council, but it would include all bodies within the UK, is really how to do more with less, because it is very difficult to find adequate resourcing, and yet we are challenged continually to reach wider audiences. And very much as Mami has outlined today, that's what we're looking at, and how we can exploit the opportunities that exist in digital technology to engage not only with a wider audience, but more richly, more deeply, and in very interesting ways. And so we're delighted to have two experts in the field here from the UK to be speaking. Mark Sands from the Tate, as Mami has explained, and also Alex Fleetwood, who is one of the UK's leading creative entrepreneurs and director of Hide and Seek. And Mark's talk in a minute is going to take us through, I think, some of the exciting things that the Tate are doing in this area. And I hope that will spark many questions and comments and sharing of experience with the audience today, with all of you. In terms of the British Council, our job is to create further cultural, educational links between the UK and Japan, and to look for innovative ways that our two countries can work together to solve common problems. And so the problem of how we reach out to that wider audience, how we make use of this technology, is something we both share, and we hope that today we can discuss the common issues and also find some common solutions. So once again, I'd like to thank the Mori Art Museum for their wonderful generosity, hospitality, and support, and I hope that you all find this a very interesting and exciting afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So now we'd like to welcome Mark Sands. Please on the stage. Okay. I just want to introduce briefly. Mark Sands joins the Tate in the post of Director of Audiences and Media in May 2010. And Mark was previously on the board at Guardian News and Media as Marketing Director of The Guardian, The Observer, and their website. Prior to joining The Guardian, Mark worked for LWT Granada Television as Marketing Director. And more detailed bio is on your handouts. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. It's a complete pleasure to be here in Tokyo. It's my first time, and so far I'm loving it. I'm going to talk to you about the stuff that Tate has been doing digitally, but also beyond that, because there's certain digital developments around the world in museums and galleries that I think are really interesting. Now, how many of you here have been to the Tate? Just put your hand up if you've been to London. Okay, brilliant. So you know all about it. Tate actually gets about 7.5 million visitors a year in the physical space. Tate Modern gets about 5.2 million visitors. Tate Britain about 1.5 million. There's a Tate in Liverpool that gets about 700,000-800,000, and there's Tate in St Ives, a very small one in the West Coast, that gets about 250,000. So you might wonder why we are spending so much of our time and our energy in the digital space. It's because you have no choice but to do this, because the audience demand is there. And the question is the degree to which any organization is willing to engage with it. There will be people who go first and there will be people who follow, but ultimately you have no choice because the audience will demand it and they're continually demanding it. This is what Tate looks like. For those of you, our brand logo, which is rather famous around the world. There was a very interesting moment last February when I was listening to a podcast, an American podcast, by an online magazine called the Slate Gabfest. And I hope you'll be able to translate this. It says, "Can I say to the museums of the world, your websites suck?" Maybe they don't want their websites to be too good. They want people to come to their museums. One of the issues has been that people are really scared that if you put too much online, people won't come to the gallery. There is absolutely no evidence that that is the case. And our view is that there is no experience that it can match seeing a work in the real space and the digital space. This is not a comparison. If you look at the Lee Bull exhibition over there, it's one thing to see it online, but it's a completely different experience to see it for real. So our view is that is not an issue. And even if it was an issue, you cannot stop this tidal wave of digital. You have no issue or choice but to embrace it and develop that. So that's my start point. And it was said because last February the 1st, there was a project that was launched by Google called the Google Art Project. Again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. If you're not, and if you don't do anything else after this talk, have a look at the Google Art Project and spend some time there. It's not perfect, but it's an incredible start to the digital space for Google. And interestingly, no gallery around the world was willing to engage with it really until the Tate said yes. The Tate started it, and then about 17 galleries in 9 different countries joined the Google Art Project. And what it did was it took a single artwork, and we don't have Wi-Fi here, so I can't show you this, but go and have a look at this artwork online. This is Chris Ofili's No Woman, No Cry. And they have pictured it at a gigapixel level, that is, you can view it closer than the human eye. So that's one part of the project. The second part of the project is that they have used the Street View technology to allow you to tour the gallery space. So from here in Tokyo, you can go to Tate Britain, and you can have a wander around Tate Britain. Now, in truth, it doesn't work brilliantly, but it doesn't matter. It's the first example of many, and it's the first time we've tried that in the digital space, and it will continue. Google Art Project are coming back, actually later this year, to do phase 2 of that. We think it's a really interesting, I think there's pre-Google Art Project, and there's post-Google Art Project when it comes to the digital space. The second one I want to show you was something that the Guggenheim did. The Guggenheim did a project called YouTube Play, where they asked the audience to upload their own video moving image artworks. I think about 28,000 people sent in artworks, and they then selected 25, what they didn't call them winners, but what they were essentially winners, and allowed them a show actually at the Guggenheim itself. So the demand is absolutely clear. Let's go back to the Tate. Some of you may have seen the Ai Weiwei project at Tate, the sunflower seeds that ran last year. It looked a little bit like this. They filled the turbine hall full of the sunflower seeds. Now, interestingly, they look like that from close up. Interestingly, Weiwei himself was very keen on audience interaction. Weiwei was in China at the time, and we are equally keen on developing the triangle between gallery, audience, and artist. And this is a brilliant example of the triumvirate coming together. In this instance, Weiwei, we asked people who went to the exhibition if they could upload a question, a video question, to Weiwei that was then put online, and he would answer them. 24,000 questions went up online. He didn't answer all of them, but we aggregated a whole series, and he was uniquely involved in audience engagement in this one, which could only have happened in the digital space, even more enhanced by the fact that he was in China at the time. Tate has also embraced both Facebook and Twitter in a very, very big way. We now have about 550, 60,000 followers on Twitter, about 400,000 on Facebook. Now, we don't do it for fun, and we do it ultimately because we want more people to engage with the artwork, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. This is what we do with our Twitter feed. And here is an example of where people are coming from. We know that in terms of the stats, in terms of, this is on Facebook, 72,000 people come from the UK, 25,000 likes from Italy, down to Greece, 8,000, and the gender split is also very interesting. So we know it's having an international play and is allowing the artworks to be viewed in a global sense. We also do some very interesting projects through Twitter. This is what we call Work of the Week. How many of you here have Twitter accounts? Quite a lot? Actually, not that many, quite a few. If you go to Tate, you can subscribe to our Tate feed, and one of the things you'll get is the Work of the Week. It's sent every week, and it's a piece of art that we choose, and we just send it out to the audience with a few words attached. Now, we do this because the Tate looks after Tate has a collection on behalf of the nation of 72,000 artworks. And those 72,000, of those, about 15% you can see them at any time in a physical sense. But this allows us to send the artwork out, people open it, they have a look, they come to our website, and because of that, they're then able to look at the other areas of the collection that essentially we're looking after, but they can't see because there simply isn't enough space within the physical space of the gallery. This is a really good one. This is the weather forecast. Every Friday, we have a look outside the office, and we think, what is the weather going to be like? We think, what is the weather going to be like? And if it's going to be rainy, or if it's going to be sunny, or if it's going to be cloudy. And we send out a tweet, and this one here says, the weather forecast for this weekend resembles the rainbow painting by Norman Adams. Have a good weekend, everyone. So every Friday, this goes out. Again, we do it so people will click on it, and they'll spend more time in the collection. This is our obsession when it comes to digital. It's a great way of doing it. It's a very easy, simple way of engaging the audience. One thing you'll notice in a lot of these these are examples that are done in an essentially non-academic way. We are not looking to engage the audience at this level within a curatorial art historical context. We simply want them to experience the work. For those who want to achieve the art historical view or the curatorial view, you will be able to buy the catalogue of the show. Most people don't buy the catalogue of the show, but they do want to engage with the art. Most people, in my view, are also really scared of art and don't know how to engage with it when they come to a gallery. They shouldn't worry about this. What they should do is just relax and enjoy it. But there's a real barrier between art and the audience. And our view is that digital will lower that barrier significantly. Because I think viewing art is like a little muscle somewhere. The more you look at it, the easier it gets. And the more relaxed you are with it, and the less scared you are of it. And digital is allowing us to do that in a very, very big way. So we send out the weather forecast. Now this here is a weather forecast, but as you'll see here, it drives an awful lot of web traffic. So when we send this out, people come back to our website. Very few people go directly to museum websites at the moment for reasons other than what time are you open, what's on, and where are you? And what we want them to do is to go and visit the art. So this is why we're doing these sorts of projects. Every week, we do a Tate debate. Every Friday, there's a debate about a subject that we choose with our curatorial colleagues as to what the debate will be about. And here, this is a debate about should museums be using social media more creatively? The answer is, of course, yes, but how you do it became the debate. And it was a very interesting debate with numerous threads that engaged the audience for a week. Here, we also talk to our audience and ask them questions to help us. The question at the top says, we're having a play with the Inspire Me tool by Tate Kids. Tate Kids is a part of our website that is for children. Some of the things it comes out with are hilarious. Here's one of mine. Remember, I'm not quite as good as our wonderful artists. I'm sure you can do better. So we send this out. The audience is coming back with a whole series of suggestions. Another one here is, do you have a vintage Tate memory? Here's TRex, the musical band by Mark Bolan, posing outside Tate Britain in 1969. It's amazing how this comes back. In 1960 was the first Picasso exhibition in London at Tate Britain. Next week, there's another Picasso exhibition at Tate Britain on Picasso and modern British painters. We, through social media, put out the message saying, is anyone here who went to the exhibition in 1960? Hundreds of people came back and said yes, because either they were online or their children asked their parents or their grandparents, and they were. And we got heaps of information and comments about the exhibition then, and now the exhibition now. It then became a feature in one of the national newspapers, which further promoted the show. So through crowdsourcing, we're getting more information, more engagement, and much more dialogue with our audience, which we think is incredibly important. I think that there's a real desire from audiences outside for galleries to open up, for galleries to say, actually, yes, we are academic spaces, but we are also spaces of complete joy, complete interest, and you can come and engage with us. It's very difficult to do that in the physical space of the gallery. It's very easy to do it in the digital space. If I can give you one more example. There was a terrible killing of a black teenager called Stephen Lawrence about 18 years ago. And you may have read in England there was a trial 18 years later which finished only a month ago. And 2 of the 5 killers were sent to jail. The very famous painting that I showed you earlier, this one, is a painting by Ofili that relates to the death of this young man, Stephen Lawrence. This painting was in storage. To get a painting out of storage is very difficult. So on the morning after the trial was announced, that the 2 killers went to jail, we took the painting out and sent it straight online, on Twitter and on Facebook and on our website. 3 weeks later, we removed the painting from the collection storage and put it on show in the exhibition. So it's allowing you to be responsive to culture, to society, and the things that are happening around you. So there are many ways in which you can use digital space to be more responsive. This is a sweet one. This is, again, just a fun thing that we did, which was called Art Film Title. And you'll see that it's taking titles of films and just putting artist names in them. So you've got A Manet for All Seasons, Dog Degas Afternoon, Vermeer to Eternity, Oh, What a Lovely Warhol. These are all obviously films with painters' names in. It's just a bit of fun, but it's just allowing the audience to engage in a different way. Because museums are full of the same people. We have to enlarge those number of people, either who are coming or who are engaging with us. This is a rather brilliant app, Museum of London Street Map. This allows you to take a painting or take a photo of where you are. This is, in the background here is London in 2009. In the foreground is a painting from the collection that is exactly the same place that it was painting. And it's allowing you to look historically at wherever you are on any given day. There are many examples of where this works well. Again, it's a fantastic way of opening up the audience of people who can engage with your work. So those are some of the examples, some Tate, some outside of Tate. In 10 days' time, the Tate is relaunching its website. I can't show it, well, I can show it to you, but it doesn't exist in the digital space yet, but in 2 weeks it will. So if I may, I'm going to give you a sneak preview and tell you what we're doing and why we're doing. Because this is our really big play into the digital space. And Tate has been a forerunner of the digital space for many years. It was one of the first galleries to go online. And in this instance, it's going to leapfrog, we think, everyone else's website. Now, interestingly, as we've developed it, the one place we have not looked for advice or anything we want to copy is in the gallery world. You have to step out of the gallery world if you want to develop your own website in the museum space. I think there's very little to learn from other galleries and other museums. My background is within newspapers at the Guardian newspaper, where for the last 16 years they've been obsessed with their digital presence and have pursued it vigorously. So a lot of what I learned there, we are adopting here on Tate's website, and equally, as I'll show you, we're adopting other tricks and other ways of presenting the website. So my advice would be look outside of the gallery world. There's almost nothing to learn digitally within it. Website started as a brochure. When we started, this just said, we're here, this is what's on, come and see us, this is how much it costs. It then moved to a channel, and it's now moving to a platform. And there's two significant things that are different about the new website is the ability to search through the collection. As I said, 72,000 artworks exist within the Tate's collection, of which 36,000 relate to JMW Turner. You can now search the entire collection with any given keyword you like. If you want to do sunshine, dogs, white shirts, microphones, anything you want, it will come up with what's in there. And also, if you've had enough of Turner, you can click a little button and it'll take all the Turners out and just look at the rest of it. Totally up to you. But the key thing is you have to give the power, which is very difficult for museums culturally to do, to the audience. Here's the really hard thing, is that online you have to move from an organization-centered organization or company to an audience-centered one. You cannot just push. And the really difficult thing for galleries and museums is that the moment you enter the digital space, you are inviting comment back. In my experience, most galleries do not want comment back. Galleries are saying, here it is, hope you like it. If you don't like it, not my problem, because something will be coming again soon. In this instance, audiences respond, and they respond vigorously. And so when you engage in the digital space, you have to allow a feedback loop for the audience. We used to be called Tate Online. We're now called Tate Digital, because it's not just about the web presence. It's about web, it's about social media, it's about developing apps, it's about ebooks, it's about tablets, connected TVs, in-gallery experience, and also commerce. Commerce is a really, really interesting and important part of what Tate does. Tate is funded 40% by the government, 60% privately. The 40%, as Jeff mentioned, is going down, and it will continue to go down. Therefore, the commerce part of what we do is incredibly important. We interweave commerce throughout our entire website. At any point, you can duck out from where you are and go and buy something. In an appropriate way, it's done very subtly, but it's interwoven throughout the entire website. Just a few facts about our digital presence. We have, depending on what time of the year, in the summer it's a bit less, about 1.1, but between maybe September and April we have about just under 2 million visitors per month. There's about 420,000 web pages, which is a complete nightmare when you are looking to redo your website, because you have to change them all. We're taking everything into the new look and the new feel. 40% of our audience is international. There's about 500,000 Twitter followers, just under 350,000 Facebook fans. I think that will go beyond 1 million very soon. We have also just around 100,000 members of the Tate. And members of the Tate pay between $100 and $200 per year for free access to every single show and multiple access. They also get about 10% of anything we sell in the museum. So there's very, very strong financial reasons. They also get early previews for all the shows. So if last week we opened a Kusama show at Tate Modern. If you're a Tate member, you can come in the day before, come and have a look and enjoy it without thousands of people there. And we have just about 500,000 email subscribers. This is what our website looks now. It's really ugly. It's very good functionally, and it's quite interesting, but it's actually designed, this is not really a very good public website. If you're an 8-year-old boy, I've got 2 sons, one of 15, one of 13. They don't go here. They both do art at school, but they don't go here, but they will go to the new one. I've tested the new one on them. This is a site that is just selling. It's selling, selling, selling. It's too much. This is not an audience-centered site. And it's because it's been built over the last basically 12 years. So we've said, enough of that, we're going to change it. And we're going to change it on 3 pillars. It's going to be about content, community, and commerce. And those 3 pillars are not of equal importance, but they are of primary importance. I'd argue that content is the most important, and then beneath that is community and commerce. Now, interestingly, this is what the navigation bar is going to look like. And I only mention this, at the top of the website. If you look at the top up there, it says Art and Artists. Now, throughout the development of the website, we have conducted research amongst people who use the website, amongst children, amongst non-academics, and amongst academics as well. And what we've found is that most people, this used to be called, where it says Art and Artist, it used to be called the collection. Normal people do not understand what the collection is. They don't understand that that is the work owned by the nation, which we're looking after on their behalf. So could you please call it something that I might understand, which is why we changed the name to Art and Artists. Now, underneath that, there is the collection, and there's work that we don't own. But in terms of where you come in, you need to come in on something that people understand, and the rest are pretty obvious. So the website allows you to, here we are looking at artworks, allows you to sort the artwork any way you like. And in this case, we have looked, if you look at the top left, we have searched under the word portrait. So what portraits are in the collection? And it shows that there are 2,842 portraits in the collection. So let's say you want to click on this guy here. So you can go in, you can click up. It will tell you the painter, all the information you want to know. On the left is probably enough for casual visitors. On the right are related features and related detailed academic publications that relate both to the painter and this particular artwork. There's also a really nice bit at the bottom. At the bottom, it says other works of art you might be interested in. And for those of you who buy music or buy books, you'll know that it says, if you like this, you might like this. So we go from that portrait to these. You click on them all, and as you keep clicking, it'll keep going. You might like this, you might like this, you might like this. It is all about making it really simple for the audience to view the collection. It's exactly the same as retail websites do. We've adopted that and taken that for Tate's website. So we're back at that portrait, and we've gone back, still within the portraits, we've gone on. You can present them this way if you like, still on portraits. Also, you can present them full screen. It's totally up to you. And at the bottom here, you can just click through, or if you want, you can just have it completely full screen with absolutely no information whatsoever. And if you really want, you can press a little key button that allows you to view all 72,000 artworks for 1 second, for 1 minute, whatever you want. It'll just keep scrolling on your computer, and you can go through the entire collection in a day or a year or a month or whatever you want. So putting the power in the control in the hands of the audience. Now, as I talked about Turner, the 36,000 pieces of artwork, Turner, we have all Turner sketchbooks, which, if you see here, goes back to 1795. Now, I can't show you this exactly, but you will be able to look at every single Turner sketchbook online just by literally with your finger, rather like this. And you can look at it with more information. You can then go to the final artwork itself. But essentially, it's a way of scrolling everything, which if you're an academic or interested in Turner, and you're in Japan, for example, there is no way that you can see this now. But from 2 weeks' time, if you want to spend your life immersing in Turner, you will be able to look at absolutely everything he ever did. That's a different one there, a different page. And here is a page for members' rooms. This is the other really interesting thing. We are now saying to our audiences, we want your view. The thing that galleries never ask is, what do you think? I don't quite know, I do know why, but draw your own conclusions why they don't say that. We are saying that we want to be the place where discussion and debate happens about art and about the visual arts. There clearly is an enormous debate going on, but it's not taking place within the structure or confines of any gallery. The Tate is saying, actually, come here, have the debate, have the discussion with us. And we will have a whole blogging space where we do exactly that. We had, last year, 2 years ago, we started this, where I said to Nick Sirota, who is the director of the gallery, if we are to take this seriously, you have to blog as well. And Nick did blog. He blogged 3 or 4 times. There is no point in doing this unless the most senior people in the organization do it as well. They don't have to blog every day, but they have to give the signal to the rest of the organization that we're serious. Otherwise, I know you're looking in horror over there. You only have to do it once or twice a year. But you have to give the signal that this is what we're doing. Now, we now blog every single show. We don't just blog the big shows. Now, if you look at, there's a Kusama, if you go to Tate's website, there will be a Kusama blog going on. There's the big blog for the Damien Hirst show starting in April. We started this 2 years ago with the Gauguin exhibition, where I asked the curator to blog. She eventually blogged 36 times over a 4-month period. We got a stunning amount of feedback, and the blogs were not curatorial academic blogs. They were interesting things about the exhibition, and if I can tell you one of them, I asked her to blog about the subject of interpretation. Interpretation is clearly a complex issue within galleries. No one in the outside world understands it. Maybe they don't need to understand it, but if you tell them about it, they're fascinated. So we put a picture up online and said, this is what interpretation's about. It's the bit of wall text on the side of the wall. You've got 80 words to interpret this painting. And just over 100 people sent in an interpretation. Now, I think that some of it was rubbish, some of it was fantastic, and most of it was somewhere in between. And that's fine. But if you engage the audience, that's what you want back. And here is the commerce part of the site. I was interested, I was talking to your gallery director here. Those posters as you come in are absolutely fabulous, but apparently you can't buy them. We sell thousands of posters at Tate, not of necessarily the artworks, but of the exhibitions, and it's a fantastic way of making quite a lot of money, so that's just a small observation. But this is our commerce part of our site, where you can buy anything from art history, but again, this has been totally modeled on Amazon. In the digital world, just steal other people's ideas and then make them your own. And here, as you go in, and you can buy this, etc., etc. This is what the new homepage looks like. So earlier, do you remember I showed you it was like this? It was that. When you open Tate's website, it's now going to look like this. It's going to look like, and every day there will be a new artwork And the primary thing you'll see is a massive artwork. We are an art gallery. We're not a shop. A shop is part of it. We sell things, but mostly we're there for art. And every day this will change. And importantly, here is where we're saying our dialogue with our audience is so important, we're going to make it the second thing people see. The first thing they see is the artwork. The second thing they'll see and be invited to do is to comment on that artwork. What do they think? How do they feel about it, etc. As you go below the page, it looks like this. So here you're into selling the exhibitions, and here you can put whatever you want. And that's what the homepage will look like. It is not like it used to be at all. And part of that has been developed with our audience, because we know what they really want to see is art. So content, community, and commerce. What are we doing next? I'm interested in visits. KPIs, it's an awful thing. It's key performance indicators, but this is how, I hate saying things like that, but sometimes you have to. It's about visits, it's about unique visitors, it's about number of pages visited, it's about the time they spent on the website, it's about revenue, and it's about downloads. It's going to also be about registered users, returning visitors, comments, shared content, and social media. People now care at the Tate how many Facebook followers we have and how many Twitter followers we have. It's now an important part of what we do. As we move future, it's going to be about mobile. It's going to be about an editorial strategy, because we're moving from a very passive website to a very active website that requires an editorial strategy and an editorial group who are going to decide, A, what we put up and what we say about it, which I know is going to get all incredibly complicated. And that's it. So that's the Tate's view of the world, and I hope some interesting things of the digital, what is happening. And happy after you've spoken to take questions later.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we'd like to welcome Alex. Please be on the stage. Alex Fleetwood recently won the British Council UK Young Performing Arts Entrepreneur of the Year Award. He founded Hide and Seek in 2007 and has had a hand in all its projects since then. Specializing in social games and playful experiences, Hide and Seek founded the UK's first festival of Pervasive games in London the same year. More detailed bio is in your handouts. Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone, and I'd like to add my thanks to Mark for inviting me here to this wonderful museum and to Tokyo. It's my first visit too. So I'm going to, Hide and Seek is, I think, a little bit less well known than Tate. So I'm going to begin by just describing a little bit about the history of our studio, and then talk about a couple of projects, one that we made in collaboration with Tate in 2010, and one more recent project. So a little bit about Hide and Seek. Our kind of motto is inventing new kinds of play. We're a game design studio dedicated to inventing new kinds of play. And what do I mean by that? Well, it proceeds from a few important ways of understanding the world. The first is that everyone is a gamer. It is sometimes common to think of gamers as teenagers, maybe boys, maybe sitting alone in their room, playing. But actually, that's inaccurate in two important ways. The first is that actually games proliferate across all platforms and are designed to appeal to all ages and levels of interest. So we have games intended to be played by the elderly, games by very young children, games to be played on your mobile phone on the move or on Facebook with your friends. There really is no single unitary definition of a video game anymore, if there ever was. And the second is that, of course, games have become very associated in the public consciousness with video games, with the arcade. And of course, play is as old as human culture. Wherever archaeologists find evidence of human settlement, they will find evidence of games. So board games, parlor games, street games. These things have infused human lives since there have been humans. So inventing new kinds of play is partly about recognizing that games and play can be a very diverse and very unpredictable thing and can manifest in any form. The second part of my personal approach to games comes out of, before starting hide and seek, recognizing that there was a generation of artists working in the UK who were making work that they were describing as participatory, or site-specific, or immersive, or interactive. And my personal view was that really what all of these artists were making were, in some sense, games. It was work inspired by and informed by their lives growing up playing games of all kinds, and a desire to manifest that in some way in their practice. That, not calling it a game, was very interesting to me, because ideologically, certainly when I started hide and seek, the word game was considered very strange and somewhat threatening in a cultural context. The idea that a game could be a cultural form, that it could contain things that were aesthetically rich, that it could be expressive of a personal viewpoint, did not resonate with many fellow cultural practitioners. The view was that games were childish, trivial, and made for commercial purposes only. So the center of hide and seek is in inviting artists to make games, and by doing so, collaborate and extend their work and understand their work in new ways. So we've collaborated with a range of artists and cultural organizations to understand how different disciplines can manifest through games and engage with audiences in different ways. Last kind of tenet of the company, and I think this is already really covered, but we are not wedded to one specific technology or one mode of delivering the game experience to players. We've made work that manifests in the browser, on smartphones. We've also made board games and card games and games that take place with children in playgrounds where the delivery device is a teacher. So it can exist and does exist anywhere. Just a little about our history. The first place where these ideas came to life predated the creation of the company, and that was a festival of pervasive games on London's South Bank, actually in the BFI, the British Film Institute. That was the first time where I had curated artists and game designers to come together and experiment with making work. And they did so really without using technology at all, and simply by creating games that people understood how to play with pieces of paper or by having the rules explained to them. That invitation for artists and game designers to come together, but also an invitation for an adult audience in London to come and play games together, proved tremendously powerful. We received an amazing amount of feedback from that first event, and so we decided to continue. The first way that we continued is through something called the Sandpit, which is an event that we still produce. It's a regular night. We do about 7 or 8 a year, where 10 to 15 new works are play tested. That is, they are attempted with an audience who play them and give feedback in order for the creators of those works to understand how they manifest as a game. It's kind of obvious to say so, but a game does not exist until and unless it is being played. And it is only in that process of seeing a game being played that you understand as a designer whether it works or not. So partly our work is about curating that network and providing them with opportunities to collaborate and develop and grow. But also, as we produce these events, it became clear that there was a great deal of interest in our work from a variety of sources, some from the cultural sector, but also from brands and digital marketing agencies and broadcasters and media producers. So a studio was founded by myself to take into account our own developing practice as our own creative work and to find ways of funding and distributing that work into the public space. So on the studio side, we've produced work for a range of clients, including Warner Brothers, the British broadcaster Channel 4, Sony PlayStation, and the Royal Opera House, in addition to the project for Tate Modern that we'll talk about in a moment. So having used the term pervasive game, I felt it was reasonable to define that term a bit more because it's not commonly understood. So a pervasive game fuses the abstract design principles of game design, which is a design discipline much like interaction design or architecture, excuse me. It tries to draw on a variety of sources from contemporary culture, so working with choreographers, with theatre makers, with composers, to aggregate different sources into the medium. And it takes place played by real people in public spaces. So our work has been played all across the South Bank, in the street, in galleries, in museums. And it makes use of, but is not completely derived from, emerging technologies. So looking at different ways that the handset, the mobile device that we carry with us, can network with the world and also with other people. So it was in that context that we received a brief from Tate Media, one of the other kind of subsidiaries of the Tate organization, to look at a game which was intended to inspire engagement with Tate Modern's artworks in the gallery. They were also interested if it was possible to create a persistent tool, so not an event or something that required an individual to run it on a permanent basis, but something that audiences could access whenever they chose. The result of that project is something called Tate Trumps, which is what I'm going to describe now. But just before I get into showing you the artwork itself, I thought I would just share with you an anecdote that emerged from the research. Our observation of visitors to the gallery are partly what we based our design decisions on. And it stems from what, for me, is a very important question about how one exactly engages with an artwork. Because, well, the anecdote, which I apologize in advance, does include some swearing, is that there were two teenage boys who were in one of the galleries in Tate Modern looking at the artworks. And I was particularly struck by these two boys because they seemed very confident and very intent on looking at all of the artworks in turn. And they didn't seem intimidated by the environment, which, if you observe visitors to Tate Modern, is quite rare. And they walked around the outside of the gallery and they looked at every artwork in turn in complete silence. And then, just before they left the gallery, I heard one of them turn to the other and say, "I have no fucking idea what any of that was about." And for me, this describes something really important, which is just because you are standing before an artwork does not necessarily mean that you are engaging with that artwork. That fear which Mark described can manifest as anxiety, which produces a layer of interference between you and that artwork. And I experienced this myself, the feeling, am I understanding everything I ought to understand? Is there something that I'm missing? Why is it that all the people around me seem to know what to do and how to approach this artwork and how to engage with it, and I do not? And it was from that kernel that we developed our ideas. So I'm going to begin by showing you a trailer from the game, which is available to view online. And we don't have sound, so I'm going to try that again. Okay, so we've lost sound, so I'm just going to describe the game instead. It's not important. So the game is called Tate Trumps, and it is an iPhone game available on iOS devices. And the proposal for Tate Trumps is it turns the entirety of Tate Modern into a game. So having downloaded the artwork and arrived at the gallery, you are invited to select to play the game in one of 3 different modes. So in battle mode, you're going to be roaming the art gallery, asking yourself the question, if all of the artworks in Tate Modern came to life, which ones of them would win in a fight? There are other modes to play. If you choose a more reflective mode, mood mode, then you are asking yourself the question, which of these artworks are the most exhilarating, menacing, or absurd? And in collector mode, you're actually based much more on the art historical data about the collection. You're asking yourself the question, which of these pieces would form the ultimate home art collection? So, having made your choice and selected your opponents, the game is for 3 players, and you can either play against human opponents or with their own devices, or the computer will fill in and play if you don't have friends to play with. You start exploring the gallery, and when you see an artwork that you think looks like it might be good in a fight, if you're playing in battle mode, then you enter a short number which is on every information panel in the Tate's gallery, which is the Tate's identifying code for that artwork. And then on your phone, you get a card which shows the game. Shows the artwork with some arbitrary, well, not so arbitrary, some oblique scores which we have allocated to every artwork which is on display in the Tate's permanent collection. So, Gerhard Richter, Cage 1 to 6, we've decided is a very powerful artwork. It takes up the whole room, so it's very big, and for various reasons, it's very agile and strong. So each artwork has these values. Matisse's snail is very large, but it's not very agile, and it's really rather fragile as well. And however, if you find Roy Lichtenstein's Wham, well, that is a painting of a fighter plane firing a missile. So that's pretty much as powerful as you can get within the Tate's artworks. So you have a limited amount of time to find 7 artworks that score highly in the mode that you have selected, and then you play a simple game of trumps, which is if you've played bridge or whist or any of those games, you know that you have to play a card with the highest value in a particular category, and then you win the trick. And the player who wins the most amount of points at the end of that is the winner. So it attempts to propose a very different mode of engaging with those artworks by offering this playful, oblique, some might say a little silly way of looking at the artworks. We invite players to transform their relationship with the environment and to bypass the traditional curatorial path around the edge of the gallery. So, I'm going to talk more about the kind of outcomes of the game in a minute, but just to give you a sense of what it takes to produce a game like this within an organization like Tate Modern, we undertook a great deal of research and engagement with a broad variety of departments within Tate before we began. So we were working with the curators team, their learning and interpretation team, but also their digital and information technology and infrastructure teams. And we had to build trust to work across all of those teams before we began. There was a complex balancing in the design process of the game between existing uses of the space and the creation of this game framework that would inhabit the same environment. It's very clear that there are an awful lot of games which would be incredibly disruptive to other users of Tate Modern who come to engage with the artworks as they choose to. So the game that we've created is still a game about walking around the gallery and looking at artworks. It doesn't intervene more aggressively into the space than that. And finally, there was a complex challenge around devising these scoring categories and scoring the artworks. It was a really interesting and quite lengthy process to work with Tate's curators and interpretation teams to agree on categories that they felt they could let us score the artworks in. For example, in collector mode, we would initially have liked to have simply made collector mode about the publicly quoted values of those artworks at the time that we set up the game by taking someone from Christie's or one of the other auction houses around and valuing the works. But Tate felt, and I fully understand and support this, that they could not ascribe value to the artworks in that way, and so instead we had to find slightly different means of scoring it. So that research and design and development process manifested in the form of numerous playtests before we had started any digital development whatsoever. So we were able to play the game by hide-and-seek staff members being the game. So we were walking around and people were saying, I like that artwork, and we would give them a piece of paper with a score, and running around on mobile phones to our colleagues, trying to make the whole thing work as best we could. And it's a tremendously useful part of the process, and it enabled us to engage with gallery visitors, curators, a wide variety of people to test the propositions of the game. Deployment for the game, one of the ways in which we had to engage with the information technology teams here was by building in a new Wi-Fi network into the building. The game relies on communication with Tate Modern's website. We do not host the artworks in the app. We are streaming those artworks from Tate's website. This is partly because the Tate collection changes all the time, and therefore what's on display changes, and also partly to do with licensing restrictions about how we used the image files themselves. So we had to work very closely to make sure that the physical infrastructure of the building supported the game when it launched. The game has changed since its launch about a year ago, and I'll talk about that in a second. So what were the outcomes of the project? Well, we definitely achieved player engagement. The app has been downloaded over 20,000 times, and over 30,000 plays have been recorded. And the anecdotal responses from players has been incredibly powerful. We have many stories of families playing together, and young children who've been to the gallery before and been bored, finding a way of engaging and playing together. We have lots of gamers. We know hide and seek has an audience that is comprised as much of people who play games as it is of people who like culture coming to the gallery for the first time. And something that I've observed, which I delight in, is the subtle change in atmosphere that takes place within the gallery itself when people are playing. You see these very animated, lively people with their heads up walking into a room and quickly survey all of the artworks in the gallery, pick the one that they think is interesting and walk directly to it. And people just kind of cock their head and wonder what is going on that's creating this slight change in usage. And it just lifts the atmosphere in an interesting way. Something interesting that emerged from it is actually, and I think this is very relevant to what Mark was saying, it can be understood as a very elaborate search engine taking you to a digital copy of one of the artworks in Tate's collection of 72,000. You are choosing to get there via a physical game, but when you do so, you have a record of that artwork on your phone, and it comes with all of this real-world metadata. I have artworks on my phone from Tate Modern's collection that I feel a deep personal relationship with because I used them to succeed in a particularly tense or close battle in one of the modes in Tate Trumps. And that is a very interesting and different kind of relationship. And finally, because the app was downloaded in 50 countries, and it was very clear that people who downloaded it in 49 of those countries were going to be disappointed, we created a mode which enables you to play the game anywhere. You can play it in any part of the world, because it comes with a kind of navigation tool and a set of artworks that enables you to play it from here. So that's Tate Trumps. How am I doing for time? 5 more minutes. I'm going to very quickly talk about a much more recent project, which was the New Year Games. So this was a very different relationship between gameplay and cultural spaces. Actually, rather than conceived of a game to be played within one cultural building, this was a game played across the whole of Edinburgh, commissioned as part of the Edinburgh Hogmanay Festival, and played on January the 1st, just over a month ago. We had 12,000 players who took part in the New Year Games across the course of the day, which articulated new relationships with many cultural spaces in the city. So there was big public games taking place in the Grass Market, which you can see on screen now. But then we had a collaboration with an installation artist to create this game played in the National Museum of Scotland. We collaborated with a choreographer to create a game which is part hopscotch, part twister, laid out over multiple spaces in a dance venue. And finally, we collaborated with a choral composer and a costume designer to create this game called Resonate the Labyrinth, which takes the Minotaur myth and a famous children's playground game to create something new. And what was exciting for venues and for us as the designers of this whole experience was that on an otherwise very quiet day in Edinburgh, when mostly people are recuperating from the excesses of the night before, we were able to create an entirely new kind of conviviality and relationship between the people who were in Edinburgh on that day. This was a game, as you'll have seen from the photos, played by old people, by young people, by visitors to the city, by locals, and whereas it might be fair to say that on New Year's Eve, the thing that's binding people together is, having a drink together. Here, what was binding people together was playing a game together. And that mode, for me, says something exciting that is possible for society, that we can find different ways of playing together and engaging with one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so let's have Mark back on the stage. Thank you for sorting out the pot. Thank you. So, I'd like to ask both of you a few questions before we open up the question to the audience. Thank you very much again for very fascinating presentations and stories. And I would like to ask Mark, probably there's some of the audience might be very much interested in more sort of practical part of the work that you are doing at the Tate, because Tate is a big institution and one of the largest art institutions in the world. And so maybe we might think that that's only possible because it's Tate, but not by the smaller institution. And how would you respond?
It's often a question that you get asked. As one of the major art institutions of the world, this must be easy for you. It's much harder for us because we have less money and less resource. I really don't buy that point of view at all. I think some of the things up there cost a lot of money and a lot of people. Others really don't. The whole area of social media and engagement that way costs very little. It is time, but it's not many people's involvement whatsoever. It's about a culture of change within an organization, because the thing about digital is it's not the responsibility of a department. it drives, museums are very much segregated by department. Digital drives right through the whole organization, and in a sense, you have to get multiple participation across the organization. Some things are expensive, most of them are not. And many of these things we have funded by sponsors. So it's actually, for example, the Tate Trumps game that Alex talked about, you'll notice if you downloaded it, and some people I saw were doing it, it's actually supported by Bloomberg. So they helped us in the funding of it. So it's a great way also to raise funding, because most organizations want to be involved in the digital innovation space. And that is a great angle to raise money.
And that's a good encouragement. Actually, how many staff under your department?
In this
how, like, who is actually writing Twitters every day and coming up with all these ideas?
In the digital space, there are 8 full-time members of staff, but they also develop, we're doing the website in-house. We're developing all the code, everything in-house. So you don't have to do that. You can put that outside. With regard to the development of our Twitter feed and Facebook, there's one person whose permanent job is, but he doesn't do it all. We have a meeting once a week, and we say, what should we do? What should we say? And he implements it, but it's the responsibility of 4 or 5 of us who meet once a week and just have fun coming up with ideas.
And when you have a meeting, do you also involve curators who might have a different views on the use of the
Yes,
art?
we do. And I think I was hoping someone would raise this. Looking at the Tate Trumps example, you can imagine there are many curators who think this is not the way that art should be presented. I fully respect that point of view. However, this represents about 0.001% of how art is presented through the Tate. So this is not the prism through which the entire picture is. What we're trying to do is to engage multiple audiences. And things like Tate Trumps has to be accepted by curatorial colleagues. Otherwise, it simply isn't going to work. So in all these meetings, we work with curators very, very closely. It couldn't work without them, because they have the knowledge. And you have to get the knowledge out of them and then put it online.
And for instance, for the renewal of the whole website, I was just curious to see how long does it take, or when did you really start it? Because it's very, very complicated work to do that.
We started 18 months ago, and we did it. We interviewed every department in the entire organization, asked them what do they want. We didn't go away into a corner and then come out with it. Everyone's involved with it. The one thing I didn't say about the new website, so 18 months, of which the first 3 months were saying, what do different departments want from a website? And some had no idea, and that's fine too. So 18 months. But one thing I also didn't say is that I'm standing up there with great certainty, as if I know what I'm talking about. I think I do, but the thing about digital is that everyone is making it up as you go along, and no one actually knows what they're doing. It's an entirely new space. I think about 80% of what we do will be right. About 20% will be, well, no, 10% will be wrong. No, 10% will be so-so, and 10% won't be good. You have to change it quick. But it's taken about 18 months, but it's been the entire organization has been involved.
And also, the other question I had was, when we do try to do something through e-media, there always language becomes the issue, and how to approach to because we are using Japanese. And I think maybe you have less problem with the languages as sort of the English speakers, but thinking of the fact that your audience coming from diverse countries, and I was just wondered your policy for multilingual system.
Yeah. At the moment, it is in English, and it costs a lot of money, but our plan is to move it into multiple languages as well. But at the moment, it remains in English. The other thing that's interesting about language, which I think is an important one, is the tone of the language that you use. Because the tone is not the normal tone that you hear from galleries. And it's very important that the tone in social media is the tone that you and I are talking in, which is not the same tone of voice as you would talk as a leading curator with either an artist or other curators. It's a different dialogue completely, which is a different point, but important.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask about the, maybe it's by the different department, but what is the Tate's policy for photography taking in the gallery?
We get 5 million visitors at Tate Modern, and another 2 million at the other ones. Until recently, we wouldn't let people take photographs in galleries. And we then realized that this policy was ridiculous. It's unsustainable, and there are 2 reasons why you're nervous about it. One is rights, but that's not actually the reason. That's the reason in this instance that we sort of is put up there, but isn't the real reason. The real reason that people are nervous about is, well, there's a smaller reason that some artists refuse, in which case you must respect that, but most don't take that view. The real reason is commerce. If people are taking pictures of the snail, they won't buy the postcard. It's just not true. People are nervous about that, but it's not true. What we won't allow is professional cameras like these. But the lady in the front's got an iPhone, and another lady's got a normal camera. You can, largely without flash photography. But what are you going to do? You're going to throw someone out for taking a photograph? Of course not. So we have a policy of, it's the same policy as the policy is don't tell, don't care. So we let them take photographs. It's a bit like gays in the army in America.
Thank you. And I also would like to ask Alex a little bit more about your sort of production process of the Tate Trump, because as Mark said, it must be an enormous amount of communication with the different departments throughout the museum. And how could you sort of first convince people in the museum and started more sort of concrete dialogue?
We didn't have to do too much convincing because this was a commission from Tate to create a game. So the proposal in its, we proposed Tate Trumps as part of the pitching process, and it was selected by Tate Media before we began work. So while there was still a great deal to do, it wasn't engaging at the level of should we do this or not. And it is, it's a matter of fact that everyone has different perspectives on the artworks within Tate Modern, and if you are a curator with your academic background and your depth of engagement with those artworks, then that perspective is very particular, and it's very rich, and it's very nuanced. But I think partly through the work that Mark has been doing, and partly because I think Tate has recognized how digital culture has shifted the audience's relationships with the artworks in Tate Modern, Tate over time. There was a freedom and a playfulness and a flexibility with everyone with whom we worked with. I think the critical thing to say is that playtesting is the nexus by which everyone can understand a game. Describing a game, and this is an unfortunate consequence of today, through a PowerPoint presentation is not the best way to describe a game. The best way to describe a game is for somebody to play it. And while very few people have the design insight to be able to discuss what a game will be from a description of it, everybody has their innate understanding of fun and of fairness, which is part of the human outlook. So when you play a game, it's very easy to give commentary and give feedback and relate to it from those different perspectives. So we very much used that playtesting as the means to communicate across departments how the game would work.
Can I just add one thing on that game? That game is developed in association with Bloomberg. Bloomberg have a deal, a sponsorship deal with the Tate, that is about bringing innovative new formats of interpretation and learning to different audiences. They sponsor that particular strand of work. That's a brilliant example of a new, innovative way of bringing learning to an audience through a digital concept. That's where it comes from.
And so this application, can you make some commerce, or do you charge, or it's a free application?
The application is free. Again, that was part of the... There's no reason why you couldn't, but because it's intended primarily as a learning and interpretation tool, it was the decision. It was made available for free in this context.
Can I add one more thing? Is that sorry, these are your questions, but it relates to this. Tate exists to increase the British public or visitor public understanding and enjoyment of British and modern contemporary art. The key word is understanding and enjoyment. That hits the enjoyment button very hard with lots of understanding.
Certainly, though, it is worth pointing out that in other areas of Hide and Seek's work, we are working with cultural organizations to help them understand how games might be a revenue stream for those organizations. Clearly, the gaming sector is very popular and very commercially successful. So we published a game with the Royal Opera House last autumn, which is also an iPhone game called The Show Must Go On, which is very much intended at a mainstream game-playing audience and is a paid-for game that's looking at how the ROH can address this funding gap, which everyone has to tackle through new means.
Thank you. I would like to then open the question to the audience. If you would like to ask any question to these two experts, we will bring the microphone to you.
Hello. It's just a question for Mark. I really love the, if you like this work, you might like these. And I just wondered if it was an automatic system or whether there's a curator's hand in there sort of guiding people through different areas.
It's essentially an automatic system, but it's done in an appropriate way. So we will run essentially the process. It'll do with period, types of artists. It'll move to a more hashtagging process, but not yet. It's quite a crude system at the moment. And actually you'll find some quite big leaps that you might not necessarily understand, and we don't either. But we will nuance that.
But they're the best ones sometimes.
Sometimes you can make some enormous leaps, exactly.
I think curation of in the digital space is a hugely important issue. Certainly, a lot of organisations in the UK digitized their entire catalogue, their entire collection, without necessarily knowing what was going to happen to it after that. And I think we see on a variety of different platforms and new startups, new ventures, being able to make sense of the unending tide of digital content and present it in ways that a user can understand and feel is personal to them, is relevant to them, is of tremendous value. And I think that's very much, kind of what Tate's new website is emblematic of.
It's emblematic of that, but if I can build on the question, the really scary aspect of this, and I'm quite nervous about this, is the loss of control. Because galleries are about the most controlling organizer, and for good reason. This is saying you have to relax, you have to let go a bit. And that is going to be a big challenge, which is going to take us down some leaps, which are going to be potentially more complicated than leaping from one artist to another with no particular reason. It's going to be very interesting culturally what happens next.
Why do you feel why does a curator care what happens on the website?
Well, at the moment, the analogy is similar to newspapers. 10 years ago, I worked in newspapers, and no journalist cared about online. Now, because all journalists really care about is being read. And you will read much more if you're on the printed version than the online version. That changed, and now far more important to journalists is what's online. So most journalists care much more about online than they do about the printed version, certainly in Western Europe. Curators at the moment don't really care, but they're going to realize very soon that it's going to affect their lives enormously. And what we have is exactly the same as you have in the newspaper world, is that curators, curators under the age of 35 who understand the digital space fully get it. Sorry. Curators slightly older, some really get it, and some don't want to touch it at all. And that is difficult. And some curators will never go near it, and that's fine as well. But curators are going to care because it's going to come to them, even if they choose not to go to it, and hopefully come to them in a delightful way.
I also think that the museums like us, who doesn't have a permanent collection gallery, we are always going through the changing exhibitions. So it's very important for us to how fast our information goes to the wider public, and then also whenever we have creates the like public program or this kind of urgent talk, it's only possible to make an announcement through the e-media, because it only happens when we know that someone is coming and make a preparation. And now after brochure, like printed materials, we all change to e-media announcement. So we don't have to spend that much money to print the papers. And then also we have such a short amount of time. For instance, like popular programs, we just fill in the seats within 2 days or even 1 day. And when we did the metabolism symposium, we filled 500 seats in just 1 day through e-media. So it's so important for us to access to not anonymous people, but more sort of potentially already interested in activities of a museum.
Can I give you another example of why curators are going to care more? On March the 24th, we're doing what we think is basically certainly a world first for us. We have developed a series of live performances that are going to take place in a room at Tate Modern that's a closed room that you will only be able to see online. I haven't curated that. It would be awful if I did it, but it's been curated by some performance artist curators, and for once a month an artist is going to enter a white room, do his or her thing for 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, and you will only be able to see it online. There will not be a physical aspect of it. It will be archived, so you can see it afterwards. So the digital issue, and that's not digital art, it's performance art that you can only see. We're doing this because we think again, the direction of travel is all that way. So in that instance, it's absolutely curatorially engaged. And what will happen from that is that there will be a discussion online, there will be a debate and dialogue, which both the curators and artists, I won't be in the discussion, no one wants to hear from me about the performance artist, but they'll want to hear from the curator and they'll want to hear from the artist himself. So it becomes a complete picture, not just about the website.
So I just think, just to extend that field of reference slightly as well, and something that I didn't talk about in my talk, it is also worth considering that perhaps it doesn't necessarily end with the concept of digital and the concept of interactivity being about how you curate and present existing non-interactive artworks and share those with an audience. You know, right now we have still, I think, a sense in the gallery sector that the art is primarily still a piece of content in some way. It's a static, fixed element, and everything that is done digitally is intended to support that and enable conversation and dialogue with that. I just wanted to put this up, which is a picture of a new building in Paris called La Gaieté Lyrique, which was opened last year to support the presentation of digital culture. And their commitment to new forms of digital culture extends into the fabric of the building itself. It's possible to essentially program the building, its system of speakers and lights and anything that you choose to network with its kind of physical interface, so projectors or other elements, sensors, in a very open and accessible way. So this actually presents, I think, a slightly more radical vision of what the relationship between building and digital and artwork can be, where, in fact, everything inside the building is playable and interactive and digital, and the building itself, the fabric of the building, is intended to support that. And I just want to kind of, I think it's really important as we understand the kind of nature of the journey that we're on, that we also understand that there is a huge future ahead of us, which, you know, is not new to art, because, you know, happenings and relational aesthetics and all of these disciplines have still always embraced the audience and participants in different ways. But I think the dissolution of the barrier between what we consider to be a physical experience and what is a digital experience, and the understanding that we are online and offline all the time at the same time in multiple spaces, is a really important thing.
And any more questions?
ありがとうございます。ですね、こういう、美術館のデジタル化っていうのが結構昔から議論として上がってるかと思うんですけども、例えば10年ぐらい前から、アーカイブっていうような考え方で、これはどっちかというと研究者向けのようなものがあったかと思うんですけども、それはなんか明らかにペイしてる感じの印象はなかったんですね。ただ今日のお話を聞いてると、こういうデジタル化っていうのが、その単に経済的な部分以外でも、十分その投資する価値があるような、印象を非常に受けたんですけども、そういうふうな流れが変わってきてる、原因といいますか、世の中の潮流というところでなんか感じているところっていうのがなんかあるのもしかしたらお聞きしたいなと。
During the last 10 years, I think there were discussions about art digitalization, but that was mainly to make archives for research purpose. And my impression was that that was not paying very much. But now listening to your presentation, I have the impression that digitalization is worth investing from an economic point of view. And that may be a change in the trend or a sense of value, perhaps. But what do you think? Why do you think there has been such a change in the trend?
The primary purpose of Tate as digital activity is not primarily commercial. It is primarily art-related, archive-related, and opening up the artwork to a greater number of people in a non-archive sense. However, the commercial opportunities from it are significant. On a major show now, whether it's Kusama last week or Picasso, we imagine that between 70 and 80% of all tickets booked will be booked online. So at the very simple end of coming to see a show, it is beginning to translate online. The revenue opportunities I can't show you now, but we have a big shop online, and the commercial opportunities for that are significant. One of the big decisions we're having to make, at the moment, everything on the website is available for free. My own feeling is that that's exactly right, and that's how it should stay. However, in the future, when we develop applications like Tate Trumps, I'm not sure they should be free anymore. I think they should be, we're going to test commercializing those as well. This is not an avenue that is well understood, but it's an avenue that we're going to keep testing and keep testing and keep testing. At the moment, the percentage of our commercial revenue, non-ticket based, is under 10%. But we have planned for it to be significantly greater than that. So I think the opportunity is there. And again, we will follow the examples by the major retailers, particularly the online retailers, and we will learn from them as to how we can best do it.
I think it's important to note that I think it's also important to note that the costs of digital production have decreased radically. Certainly, in my view, one of the most culturally interesting and commercially thriving areas right now is in the indie games sector. So that is studios of 1 person, 4 people, 10 people, producing games which they are distributing directly to their fans via platforms like the Apple iPhone App Store or Steam, charging between sort of 60 UK pence or £10, or often making their games available for free and then charging for upgrades and customization within them. There was this huge open territory of commercial and cultural experimentation kind of being woven into new games as they are brought to the indie game scene and that market. And part of what's driving that is the fact that it is possible for an individual to be the author of a complex digital piece of content in the way that it might not have been understood to be possible 5 years ago.
The area that we haven't touched on today, because it wasn't part of the remit, but it is in relation to your question, is the issue of fundraising. Our feeling is that the potential for fundraising through digital is phenomenal. If you take the world of politics in America, the level of fundraising that's come through online is huge. Now, the Tate is actually a charitable organization. It doesn't exist to make a profit, but it has significant funding requirements. We believe that there are significant fundraising opportunities, less for the big, I'm going to donate £10 million to your organization in my will, but I might donate $1 or $2 on the phone to ensure that the institution can maintain the level it's working at. So we feel that one of the biggest areas, it's not commerce per se, but it is fundraising.
じゃあ次の方お願いします。あと1つか2つぐらいだと思いますね。Just get one more two questions.
2 questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. 2 questions to Mark. First one is how important, you said how much important to invite feedback from audience. In that regard, how important to respond to these feedback and how you manage it? And my second question is, how do you know how much of these buzz you create online contribute to the actual number of visitors to the museum?
The answer to the first question is, which was about response to the questions and the feedback. There's 2 answers to that. One, you have to respond, but you don't have to respond to everything. If you look at the Tate debates, there's a whole thread of activity going on. Lots of people don't want a particular response, but they want to make a point, and there's a distinction between the 2. But many do want to a point. Now, often people say similar things, so we will aggregate the subject and respond to that. The next big question, which relates to that, if I can develop it further, is how do you respond and who is responding? Because if I put in something to Mori here, I don't want Mori to respond. I want you to respond, or the gallery director to respond, or it needs to be a person, which is quite difficult, because is the person trained? Do they know how to do it? Do they feel comfortable doing it? And within our department, there are numerous people who we've asked, A, do you want to respond? B, are you happy to? And C, do you feel you have enough understanding of how to? And in that instance, they do. The next question that came back is, do you name them individually? Because if I, Mark Sands, go online and suddenly I become very public, and maybe I'm not comfortable with that. And then there's my photo, so people recognize. So it's all sorts of issues that you have to work through, but it's mostly fine. The last issue on that is the issue of moderation. If someone comes in and says, I think, swear, 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 this is a load of rubbish, then that can be a problem. We have a sponsor who, we have 2 sponsors. One is the sponsor who is BP. BP has had significant issues, as you know, with oil and the Gulf disaster. Lots of people came onto our website and thought it was disgusting that we take their money, and they said so in words that were very clear. We tend not to pre-moderate the stuff, but what we do is if it is not talking on the topic, then we take it down and say this is not relevant to the topic. Because you have to be very careful. You're going to pre-moderate or you're going to post-moderate. And the answer is it's slightly different for different subjects. When it comes to religion and faith, it's better to pre-moderate because people are unbelievably rude to each other. When it comes to talking about oil paintings and the technique, they tend to be less rude and it tends to be fine. What was your saying?
The second question was, how do you know how much the bus contribute to the number of visitors?
Well, interestingly, the first time we did it was the Gauguin show, which I haven't talked about, but 18 months ago, 2 years ago, there's an enormous retrospective of Gauguin in London. We had a visitor figure that was, I'll tell you what it was over 340,000, 330,000. That's what we thought would come. It's the first show we ever blogged, and about 434,000 people came. Now, I don't know exactly if well, it certainly contributed, but I can't tell exactly, well, that was 10,000 more, 20,000. I know that significantly more came, and I know that significantly more people were aware, because I know exactly how many people read the blog. The blog is very cheap. Once you've entered that world, we will find out a little more as we go along. So I don't know the answer exactly, but there has been a correlation between the shows that we've opened up most and the number of visitors who've come. But if you've got a bad show, however much you blog it isn't going to make people come, but it can just take the message wider and wider.
Maybe one last question. No question? じゃあどうぞ。もう一つじゃ。
はい、作品の画像を公開するにあたっての、著作権の処理とかがかなり必要になってくるかと思うんですけども、それもかなりの作品数があると思いますので、そういう膨大な著作権の処理をどういうふうに行っているのか、効率的にもし行っている方法とかでやり込みがあるんでしたら、ご紹介いただければと思います。
How do you clear the copyrights for the images that you use for the website?
Well, for the website, you don't have to clear them because that's just fair usage. For the blog, you do have to clear them, particularly for the ones that we don't own. In those instances, we will go back either to the owner or through to the estate, or if it's a living artist, and we'll clear them directly. On the Gauguin show, we actually only cleared 16 images. And you don't just have to use the artworks. So you can use pictures of the painter, pictures of his life. So part of it is the artwork, but part of it can be the context within which he's working. But in all those instances, we clear the work.
Thank you very much for sharing this afternoon. And I think it's good time to close the conversation. And please give warm applause once again to Mark Sands and Alex Fleetwood. Thank you very much.